I never thought I would be the kind of woman who cried in a parking lot. I spent 32 years walking into hospital, rooms where families were falling apart, where people were saying goodbye to the ones they loved most, where grown men were sobbing into their hands in waiting rooms, and I held it together every single time. I was the steady one. I was the one who handed out tissues and spoke in calm voices and kept my own feelings tucked away somewhere deep until I got home and the door was closed and nobody was watching. That was just who I was. That was just how I was built. But on that Tuesday morning, when I sat down on those cold concrete porch steps and watched my own suitcase lying there, with some of my clothes spilling out onto the ground, I did not hold it together. I just sat right down and I cried like I had not cried since the day I buried my mother. Because sometimes life hands you something that even the strongest person cannot carry without breaking a little first. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this story only makes sense if you know who I am and where I came from and what I gave before any of this happened. My name is Carol Ann Whitmore. I am 71 years old, and I live in a small town just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, in a little condo that I bought for myself after everything fell apart. And honestly, it is the most peaceful place I have ever lived in my entire life. I have a small patio where I grow tomatoes every summer. I have a kitchen with big windows that fill up with morning light. I have my cat, a big orange tabby named Biscuit, who thinks he owns the place. And honestly, I let him believe it. I have my church family, my oldest friend Linda, who has known me since we were both in pigtails. And I have my 2 grandchildren who come over on Saturdays and fill this little condo up with noise and laughter and crumbs on every surface, and I would not trade a single crumb for anything in this world. But things were not always this good, and I think it is important to tell you that, because sometimes when you are in the middle of the hard part, it feels like the hard part is all there is. It feels like it is always going to be exactly this bad. I want you to know that is not true. I am living proof of that. I was born right here in Tennessee, 3rd of 5 children, grew up in a house where money was always tight, but love was never scarce. My daddy worked at the paper mill for 40 years, and my mama kept the home and everybody in it together with nothing but patience and prayer and the occasional wooden spoon when we got too far out of line. We were not wealthy people, but we were not lacking either. We had food and warmth and a family that showed up for each other and back. Then I thought that was just how families worked. I did not yet understand that it was actually something rare. I went to nursing school right out of high school, graduated, got my license, and walked into that county hospital when I was 19 years old. And I did not leave for 32 years. I loved that work. I loved it even when it was exhausting, and even when it broke my heart, and even on the days when I drove home in silence, because I had seen too much sorrow to speak. I loved it because it meant something. Every single day it meant something. And there is a particular kind of dignity that comes from work that means something. I carried that dignity with me every day. I walked through those hospital doors, and I believe it is a big part of what made me who I am. I got married at 24 to a man named Robert Whitmore. Bobby, everybody called him. He was funny and charming and tall, and I was completely gone over him from the first time I saw him, standing outside the hardware store on Main Street with that crooked smile of his. We had our son, Marcus, 2 years after we married, and for a while things were good. They were really good. We had a little house, we had our boy, we had a life that felt solid and full. But Bobby was not built for staying. That is the most honest way I know how to say it. He was not a bad man. He was not cruel or mean. He just could not seem to be still. When Marcus was 9 years old, Bobby packed a bag one afternoon while I was on shift at the hospital, left a note on the kitchen table, and drove out of our lives. Marcus came home from school and found the note before I did. My 9-year-old son read a letter from his father saying goodbye before I even knew he was gone. I have never fully forgiven Bobby for that, not for leaving me. I could have forgiven that eventually, but for making my boy find that note, for making Marcus carry that weight on his small shoulders before I could get home and be there with him, that I have never fully let go of. But I did not have time to fall apart. I had a son who needed me and a mortgage and a job that did not stop just because my personal life had, so I kept going. I picked up extra shifts when I needed the money. I went to every single school play and baseball game and parent-teacher conference. I helped with homework even on the nights when I was so tired. My eyes would barely stay open. I made sure Marcus never went to bed wondering if he was loved because I told him every single day without exception. We were a team, Marcus and I, just the two of us, against the world, and honestly, we were pretty good at it. He grew up kind and hardworking and funny. Lord, that boy could make me laugh. And when he graduated high school and then college, I cried both times because I could not believe that the little boy who had found his daddy's goodbye note on the kitchen table had grown into this strong, capable man standing there in a cap and gown. I was so proud of him I did not have words for it. He met Diane about 6 years ago. She was from a town about an hour north of Nashville, came from a family that had more money than we did, and made sure you knew it without ever saying it directly. She was pretty and sharp and well dressed, and Marcus was clearly crazy about her from day one. I tried to be open. I genuinely tried. The first time he brought her to my house for Sunday dinner, I cooked everything I had. Fried chicken, cornbread, green beans with ham, macaroni and cheese, the real kind, not the box, sweet potato pie. I wanted her to feel welcomed. I wanted her to feel like she was being folded into something warm. She was polite. She ate and said it was all lovely and helped clear the table without being asked. I thought, okay, this woman is going to be good for my son. This is going to work out fine. They got engaged after 2 years and married the following spring. I was at that wedding with everything I had. I wore a dusty rose dress that Linda helped me pick out, and I cried when Marcus saw his bride walking toward him because the look on his face was something I will carry with me forever. Whatever came after, I will always have that moment. That was real. That was true. After they married, they bought a house together. A nice one, 4 bedrooms, good neighborhood. The kind of house I had always hoped Marcus would have someday. Diane decorated it beautifully. She had a real eye for that kind of thing. Everything was in its place and tasteful, and I admired it even as I started to notice that it did not feel quite like a home to me when I visited. It felt more like a magazine, beautiful to look at, but not quite somewhere you could put your feet up and breathe easy. They had their first child, a little girl named Sophia, about a year into the marriage. Then their son James came along 18 months after that. I adored those babies from their first breath. Sophia with her serious little face and James with his absolute refusal to stop moving for even 1 second. I was at that hospital both times they were born, waiting in that waiting room that I knew better than almost any room in the world. And when Marcus came out to tell me each time, that look on his face, that odd, terrified, joyful look of a new parent, I just loved him so much in those moments I could hardly stand it. I retired when I was 67. 32 years was enough, and my knees were telling me they had also worked enough. And it was time. I had saved carefully over the years. I was not rich, but I was comfortable. I had my little house that I had lived in for 19 years. The same house where Marcus had grown up, and I figured I would just settle into retirement quietly, take care of my garden, travel a little maybe, spend more time with my grandchildren. Then one evening, about 8 months after I retired, Marcus called me and said, "Mama, Diane and I have been talking and we want you to come live with us." He said with the kids being little and both of them working full-time, it would be good to have me there. He said they had a spare bedroom and a full bathroom that was just sitting empty, and it made no sense for me to be alone in my house when I could be there with them. He said Diane had actually been the one to bring it up first. He said, "She really wants you there, Mama." I sat with that phone in my hand for a long moment. Part of me felt a kind of warmth that I had not expected. My son wanted me close. His wife had suggested it. I thought about those 2 little grandchildren and how wonderful it would be to see them every day instead of just on weekends. I thought about how lonely the evenings had gotten since I stopped working. I thought about all the years I had spent hoping Marcus would always want me in his life. I said yes. I sold my house. That was the hardest part, if I am being completely honest with you. 19 years in that house, every corner of it had a memory attached. The pencil marks on the kitchen door frame where I had measured Marcus every birthday. The flower bed out front that I had planted the spring after Bobby left, because I needed something to tend to and nurture when the thing I most wanted to tend to had walked out. The back porch where I used to sit after my night shifts and just breathe in the quiet before going to bed. I walked through every room of that house before I handed over the keys, and I said goodbye to each one like it was a person. I moved into their spare room with 2 suitcases, several boxes, my good dishes, my photos, and Biscuit the cat, who Diane had agreed to allow with what I now understand was considerably less enthusiasm than she let on at the time. The first weeks were fine, more than fine. It felt wonderful to wake up and hear the sounds of a full house. Sophia would come padding down the hall in her pajamas and climb up next to me in bed, and I would read to her before breakfast. James would crash into my room, like a small tornado, just to say good morning before running back out again. I helped with school drop-off. I had dinner started when Marcus and Diane got home from work. I felt useful and loved and like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But I started noticing things. Small things. The way you notice the first few leaves changing color in early fall. Before you really register that summer is ending. Diane would come home and check the kitchen in a way that felt more like inspection than just coming home. She would rearrange things I had moved without saying anything, just quietly put them back, but with a kind of deliberate care that let me know she had noticed. She started making separate grocery lists with her name at the top, separating out what was hers from what was shared. She stopped asking me what I thought about things she was planning for the house. I told myself I was being too sensitive. I told myself that everyone needed an adjustment period and that this was her home and she had a right to run it her way. I gave her every benefit of every doubt I could manufacture. I kept my room clean and neat. I tried not to be in the common areas too, much in the evenings when they wanted family time. I kept Biscuit out of her way. I tried in every way I knew how to be easy to have around. But the comments started, just small ones at first, thrown out lightly like they were nothing. Things like, "Oh, Carol, I see you used the good pot for that. I usually only use that for company." Or, "Did you happen to move my mail off the counter? I like to keep track of it myself." Each one was nothing on its own. Each one could have been perfectly innocent, but they came one after another, and they had a particular quality to them, a particular edge underneath the pleasant tone. And after 32 years of reading people in hospital rooms, I knew the difference between someone making conversation and someone making a point. Marcus noticed nothing, or if he did not say so. He came home tired from work and ate dinner and played with the kids and fell asleep watching television and seemed happy, enough that things appeared to be going smoothly. I did not want to be the one to disturb that. I did not want to be the mother who caused trouble. So I said nothing. Then Diane started what I thought of privately as the noting campaign. Sticky notes began appearing on things in the kitchen, her name written on certain items in the refrigerator, a note on the good mixing bowl saying please ask before using, a note on the coffee maker explaining her preferred settings, notes that said things like shared but please replace when empty or family use, only on items that had previously just been items in a kitchen we all used together. The house began to feel like it was divided into sections. Her territory and not her territory, and I was very clearly in the not her territory category. I went to Marcus one evening, just the two of us in the kitchen while Diane had taken the kids upstairs for bath time. I sat down at the table and I told him I was feeling a little uncomfortable, and I asked him gently if everything was okay, if Diane seemed happy with the arrangement, if there was something I had done that I needed to address. I kept my voice calm. I kept my words gentle. I had not spent 32 years managing difficult conversations in hospital hallways for nothing. He looked uncomfortable in a way that told me he was not surprised by the question. He said, "Mama, you know how Diane is. She just likes things a certain way. Just try not to take it personally." That was it. That was the whole conversation. Try not to take it personally, as if the woman putting her name on the mixing bowl, like she was marking territory in a dormitory, was just a personality quirk. I needed to accommodate. I tried. Lord knows I tried. I stayed in my room more. I stopped using the kitchen, except when necessary. I started eating my meals at a different time than the family to avoid being underfoot. I moved my things into a smaller corner of the shared bathroom. I made myself smaller and smaller and smaller, trying to take up less space, less air, less of anything that she might find objectionable. And still it was not enough. She started telling her friends about me in a way that I felt in my chest every time. I overheard it. When they came over, she would say, "This is Marcus's mother. She's staying with us for now," in a tone that made it sound like I was a temporary inconvenience that had not yet been resolved. Not my mother-in-law, not family. Staying with us for now. I would smile and shake hands and excuse myself to my room and sit there listening to the laughter downstairs and feel something cold and heavy sitting in my chest that I did not want to name. She stopped including me in family plans. They would make decisions about weekends and holidays and activities, and I would find out after the fact, or sometimes not at all. She stopped setting a place for me at dinner unless I specifically came down and set one myself. Sophia noticed and would drag a chair over and say, "Grandma Carol, come sit with us," and I would sit and smile and pretend everything was perfectly fine while my daughter-in-law looked at her phone and my son looked at his plate. The laundry room was the final straw before the final straw. One morning I went to do my laundry and the door was locked. I knocked and Diane came out of the kitchen and said, "Oh, I meant to tell you. I would prefer if you used the laundromat for your things. I just need to keep the machine free for the family." I stood there for a moment trying to absorb that. The family. I was Marcus's mother. I was Sophia and James's grandmother. I had lived under that roof for over a year, but I was not the family. I nodded. I said, "Okay." I took my laundry basket to my car and I drove to the laundromat on Route 9 and I sat in a plastic chair, watching my clothes go around in the machine, and I thought about the word dignity and what it means to lose it, slowly in small pieces that other people take from you so gradually you barely notice until you look down and realize most of it is gone. I started calling Linda more often. Linda had been my best friend since we were 7 years old, and she knew me better than anyone alive. I would call her in the evenings when I was in my room, and I would tell her things, and she would listen without interrupting, and at the end she would say, "Carol, honey, you know you can come here anytime." I always said I was fine. I always said things would get better. I was not ready to admit what I was slowly beginning to understand. The morning it all came to a head was a Tuesday. I remember because I had been up since before 6, the way I always am, old nursing habits that never quite let go, and I had made myself a coffee and taken my Bible to the kitchen table for my morning devotional. The house was quiet. Marcus had left for work early. The kids were still asleep. I was just sitting there in the early morning, light reading and drinking my coffee, and for a few minutes, I felt genuinely peaceful. Then Diane came downstairs. She came into the kitchen, and she stopped when she saw me, and something moved across her face, something quick and not quite hidden, and she went to the coffee maker and poured herself a cup, and then she turned around and leaned against the counter and looked at me and said, "Carol, I think we need to have a talk." I closed my Bible. I set down my coffee. I folded my hands on the table and I looked at her and I said, "All right." She said, "This living arrangement is not working for me anymore." She said it quietly, not unkindly, in the tone of someone who has rehearsed what they are going to say. She said that she needed her home to feel like her home, and that having me there made her feel like she was always being watched and always being judged, and she needed her own space back. She said that Marcus and she had discussed it and that they both felt it was time for me to find my own place. I sat very still. I've learned over a long life that the moments when you most want to speak are often the moments when you most need to be quiet first. I asked her, "Did Marcus ask you to have this conversation, or are you having it on your own?" She said they were on the same page. I asked if I could speak with him myself. She said he was at work and that this conversation did not require him. She said, "I would like you to start packing today. I will need you to be out by the end of the week." I looked at this woman. I looked at her standing in the kitchen of the house I had helped them with financially, the house where my grandchildren lived, the house I had moved my entire life into at her husband's invitation, and I felt something that was not quite anger and not quite grief, but somewhere between the two. A kind of profound weariness, a recognition that I had given far more than I had ever been given back, and that this was somehow, in her eyes, still not enough. I said, "Diane, I sold my home to come here." I said it quietly because that was all I had to say. She said, "I know, and I am sorry about that, but this is my home, and I have to think about what is best for my family." There was that word again, my family, as if I was not standing right there, as if I had not changed this woman's husband's diapers, as if I had not been sitting in a hospital, waiting room praying when she pushed both of her children into the world. I stood up. I said, "I will start packing." I carried my coffee cup to the sink. I rinsed it out and set it on the drying rack because I had been taught to clean up after myself, and I was not about to stop now. And then I walked upstairs with as much dignity as I had left, and I began to pack my life into boxes for the second time in less than 2 years. I called Marcus 4 times. He did not answer any of them. The fourth time I left a voicemail and I said, Marcus, your wife has asked me to leave. I need you to call me back. I love you, son. He texted me 40 minutes later. One text, it said, Mama, I know it is for the best right now. I think some space will be good for everyone. I love you. I sat on the edge of the bed in that spare room, Marcus's mother, 71 years old, and I read that text message 3 times. It is for the best right now. I had worked 2 jobs some years to make sure that boy never went without. I had skipped things I needed to buy him things he wanted. I had been at every game, every graduation, every hard moment, and every good one. And his response to his wife throwing me out of his house was a text message that said, it is for the best right now. I finished packing. I carried my boxes downstairs one by one. Diane was in the living room on her phone, and she watched me carry things past without offering to help and without speaking. When I had everything at the door, I went upstairs one more time to get my big suitcase. I brought it down and set it near the door. And then Diane stood up and she picked up my suitcase, opened the front door, walked to the porch steps, and she threw it. She actually threw it. It hit the top step and tumbled and fell open, and a few of my things scattered across the concrete. And she said, you don't live here anymore. And she went back inside and closed the door. I stood on that porch for a moment, just a moment. Then I walked down the steps and I picked up my things from the ground, every single item, and I put them back in the suitcase and I zipped it closed. And I sat down on those steps and I called Linda. She answered on the second ring and I said, Linda, come get me. And she heard something in my voice that told her not to ask questions right then, and she just said, I'm on my way. I sat on those steps for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the time on my phone. I sat very straight because I was not going to let any neighbor who might be watching from a window see me hunched over. I breathed slowly. I looked at the yard and the flowers Diane had planted along the walkway and the little soccer goal James had left in the side yard, and I thought about what I was leaving and what I was not leaving and which of those things was more important. Linda pulled up in her car and got out without a word and came and put her arms around me, and I let her hold me for just a minute, and then I said, help me get these in the car. And she did, and we drove away, and I did not look back. Linda took me to her house, and she fed me, and she let me cry, and she let me be quiet when I needed quiet, and she talked when I needed talking, and she is 73 years old and still one of the sharpest, most tender-hearted people I have ever known in my life. That week at Linda's house, I cried more than I had cried in years. I grieved the relationship I thought I had with my son. I grieved the version of my family that had only ever existed in my own hopeful imagination. I grieved the house I had sold and the life I had packed into boxes and the dignity I had slowly let be taken from me, piece by piece, because I did not want to cause trouble. And then I stopped crying and I started thinking. Because here is the thing that Diane did not know about Carol Ann Whitmore. She did not know that I had worked for 32 years and saved carefully the whole time. She did not know that when I sold my house, I had set aside a portion in an account that I had opened in my own name, just my name, because my mama had raised me to always keep something for myself. She did not know that I had a financial advisor I had been working with for 15 years and that my retirement was solid and well managed. She did not know that I had spent 3 decades in situations that required clear thinking, under pressure, and that I was very, very good at not panicking. She thought she had put me out on the street. She had actually just set me free. I called my financial advisor, Thomas, on a Thursday morning from Linda's kitchen table. I laid out my situation plainly, and we went through my numbers together. And when I hung up the phone, I sat back and thought, I am going to be just fine. Not comfortable fine or making do fine. Actually fine. Better than fine. I had options, real ones. I called a real estate agent named Patricia who had sold houses in our area for over 20 years, and I had known her from church for almost as long. I told her what I was looking for. Something small, first floor if possible because of my knees, 2 bedrooms, a little outdoor space, somewhere I could actually breathe. She said, Carol, I am going to find you something wonderful. And bless her heart, she meant it. 3 weeks later, I was standing in a first-floor condo with morning light pouring through the kitchen windows and a little patio off the back with just enough room for garden pots and a couple of chairs, and I knew before Patricia even finished her sentence that this was the place. It felt like the first time in over a year that a space had felt like it belonged to me. I put in an offer that afternoon. 6 weeks after Diane threw my suitcase onto those porch steps, I signed the papers on my own home, my name on the deed, my name only, nobody else's name anywhere on a single document. I went to the grocery store after and bought flowers and put them in every room. I want to tell you what moving into that condo felt like because I think it is important. It felt like putting down something very heavy that you had been carrying so long you forgot you were carrying it. It felt like taking a full, deep breath for the first time in months. I set up my kitchen the way I wanted it. I put my photos on the walls. I brought Biscuit over and he walked through every room, twice sniffing everything, and then settled on the windowsill in the afternoon sun like he had always lived there. I slept that first night better than I had slept in over a year. I spent the first month just settling in, getting my routines back, going to church on Sundays, having Linda over for coffee, planting things on my patio, remembering who I was before. I had spent a year making myself smaller to fit inside someone else's life. Marcus called about 6 weeks after I moved out. Sunday evening, which had always been our day to talk, and when I saw his name on my phone, I sat with it for a moment before I answered. I had been waiting for this call and I had thought carefully about how I wanted to handle it. I answered. He sounded different, quieter than usual, a little careful in the way people sound when they know they owe you something, but have not quite worked out how to say it yet. He asked how I was doing, and I told him I had my own place now, and it was lovely. He said he was glad. He said he had been thinking. He said he was sorry that things had happened the way they did. Not quite an apology, but something in the direction of one. I said, Marcus, I love you. I will always love you. You are my son, and nothing that happened changes that. But I need you to understand that what happened to me in your house was not okay. Your wife asked me to leave the home I had moved my whole life into. She threw my suitcase down the steps, and you sent me a text message. I need you to really sit with that. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I know, Mama, I know. And his voice broke a little on the second word, and I heard my little boy in there, the 9-year-old who found a goodbye note on the kitchen table, and I felt my heart hurt for him even in the middle of my own hurt. We talked for almost an hour that evening. It was not a full reckoning. These things do not happen all at once, but it was real, and it was honest, and it was a beginning. Things with Marcus have been a slow and careful rebuilding. He comes to see me at the condo sometimes, just him, and we sit on my little patio and drink coffee and talk. Some visits are easier than others. Some days the shadow of what happened falls between us, and we have to find our way around it. But he comes, he keeps coming, and I keep the door open. That is all I know how to do. My grandchildren, Sophia and James, I want to tell you about that because it matters. About 4 months after I moved out, Diane called me. I almost did not answer, but I did. She did not apologize in any real way. She is not, I have come to understand, someone who apologizes in real ways. But she said she had been thinking, and she asked if I would be willing to see the kids. And I said yes without hesitation. Not for her, not even entirely for Marcus. For Sophia, who used to come to my room in her pajamas, and for James, who crashed through every door he had ever encountered, and for myself, because those children were a part of me, and I was not willing to lose them no matter what had happened between the adults. I started seeing them on Saturday mornings. They come to my condo, and we bake things and do puzzles and read stories, and I take them to the park, and they tear around like wild animals while I sit on a bench in the sun and feel more like myself than I have in years. Sophia told me last month that my house smells like cookies and flowers and that it is her favorite place. I held that close for a long time after she said it. I want to say something now to whoever needs to hear it. And I think some of you do need to hear it, or you would not still be here with me. Being made to feel like a burden by people you love is one of the cruelest things that can happen to a person. It does not matter how old you are or how strong you are or how many years you spent being the one who held everything together when the people you gave everything to turn around and make you feel like you are too much, like you take up too much space, like your presence in their lives is something to be managed or endured rather than welcomed. It does something to you deep down. It makes you question things you should never have to question. But here is what I know. Here is what 71 years and 32 years of nursing and every hard thing I have ever walked through has taught me. Other people's failure to value you is not evidence of your worth. It is evidence of their limitations. And you cannot spend your life making yourself smaller to fit inside. someone else's inability to love you well, you will disappear, and you will have done it to yourself. The day Diane threw my suitcase on those steps, she thought she was ending something for me. She was not. She was beginning something. She was beginning the chapter where I remembered that I did not need anyone's permission to take up space in this world, where I remembered that I had options and resources and a life that was mine, where I walked back into myself after a year of slowly walking out. I'm not angry at Diane anymore. I was for a while, and I think that was fair. But anger's heavy, and I am no longer willing to carry heavy things that do not belong to me. What she did came from her own insecurities and her own limitations and her own fears, and none of those things had very much to do with me at all. I was just the one standing nearby when they spilled over. I am not angry at Marcus either, though I think he has more to answer for than she does, because she was not my blood and he was. He is finding his way. I have watched people find their way back from much harder things than this. I will keep the door open and I will be here when he gets there. What I am is grateful, genuinely and completely grateful. For Linda, who came and got me off those steps without asking questions. For Patricia, who found me a home with morning light. For Thomas, who helped me see that I was not as stuck as I felt. For my church family, who brought me casseroles when I moved in and sat with me on Sunday mornings and asked how I was doing and actually meant it. For Sophia and James, who love me in that pure, uncomplicated way that children love and that asks nothing and gives everything. For Biscuit, who has no opinions about any human drama and only wants his breakfast on time and a warm windowsill. For this little condo with its patio and its tomato plants and its kitchen full of morning light. And I'm grateful in ways I'm still discovering for the Tuesday morning when my daughter-in-law threw my suitcase on the porch steps, because it forced me to stop shrinking. It forced me to stop waiting for someone else to tell me I was allowed to be here. I had to go find that out for myself. And I found it. Lord, I found it. I am Carol Ann Whitmore. I am 71 years old. I raised a son alone and worked 32 years and survived and kept going, and lost things and found myself again. I am still here, still standing, still planting things and watching them grow. And if you are still here with me, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Now you tell me where you are from. Drop your city down in the comments because I love knowing where my people are. And if this story sat with you, if it said something you needed to hear today, please give it a like and pass it on to someone who might need it too. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. God bless every single one of you, wherever you are. Bye-bye.